My plan here is to show you what can go wrong with your granny gear, and I'm going to go through everything I know about it. One of the things I want to start with is all the things that could be done wrong. I'll show you those first. I start off with 3 initial ones, then add 2 more, and this is the 5th one, is these detents. These are what control your synchro, and they drop, there's 3 of them, they drop down into these slots all the way around this thing, and then you install these C-clips, springs behind them. And first thing you want to make sure of is that whoever installed them so they overlap. You cannot install them so they're both like this with the gap on the same side. They have to be overlapping like that. If they're not overlapped, then you're going to have problems shifting, or these springs will let these things fall out. That's the first thing to check. One last thing I forgot to mention is when you install the sliders, make sure this bevel is facing forward. It makes a difference on the granny gear or extra low. This is the one that slides over to connect the rear drive line. It's not so important, but I'd recommend it because you can see there's more space on this side than this side. So bevel forward. And that applies throughout the entire transmission except for first and second gear slider. You can see it right there. The bevel can be forward or aft on that one. Doesn't make any difference. Here you can see the sliders in place with the forks in them, and the bevels are facing forward. So 3 reasons why you could have troubles with your granny gear not staying in granny gear. There's a ball bearing, spring loaded, has to be there on top. The next thing is the end of that shaft, the flat side is down. If you have it up, I think you can install it up. I think I did it once. That is a problem, it won't stand into the gear. And then over here you have the same situation. There's a ball bearing that goes inside here, and a spring-loaded cylinder that follows, and a plug that goes over the top of it. It's one of the bigger plugs. Those 3 things. Probably the most important is to keeping your vehicle in gear when it's in extra low. These are all the parts that make up the 4-wheel drive shifting. I'll try to explain how they all work. Okay, that's your connection to your rear axle, to the rear drive line, and the slider, which is where my thumb is, goes back and forth and connects these gears together. And that's when you're in 4-wheel drive. So since you have the same gear ratio on the front and back differentials, this shaft on the left and the shaft on the right are rotating at the same speed, so it's just a straight across slide. There's no synchros required. And I'll show you where all these pieces go. This little pin here, an interlock pin of some sort, goes down that hole. And this is your slider that puts it in extra low gear, and it rides over the top of that pin. That slot right there is where that pin rides. So we'll put some of this together. This is the upper shift shaft, which goes into that hole. You can see that slot in it right there. That's where that interlock pin rides. So push that in there. Once that's in, then this interlock pin can drop down in there a bit. I think I'll wait and put the other shaft on first. Well, this shaft has a flat side here on the back. The flat side goes down. You put it in. You can see that pin right there that holds it in place lines up right there. Now it's right above where that interlock pin is. You can see that hole lining up right there. Now I can drop the interlock pin down through that hole. And it falls all the way down to the bottom. On top of that goes the ball bearing. And then the spring-loaded unit here goes on top of that. Now I'm going to take a step back. I have to pull this out. Get this down in there. Push the shaft through it. It's kind of hard to do this holding the camera. And then this locks this into place. And then the shifter, this connects directly to your shifter. It's in the cabin. It goes in the top slot there. Now this end of it right here rides in this slot. So that goes in and goes up into that slot right there. And then from this side, this is the slider that moves it for four-wheel drive. Put it in there, and then it interlocks with this, which is your four-wheel drive shift lever. So you got to make sure it gets up inside there. There we go. Okay, now once I took that out so I could get that lined up, but we'll put that back in. Now once, I'm not going to screw that all the way down. Don't really need to right now. Now this goes on the top and it puts pressure on this spring right here after you tighten down the bolts. I cut that cap off so we could see what was going on. So I'm going to tighten down these two bolts and I'll get back. Yeah, that's how it rides. Now in order to get this in four-wheel drive, granny gear, this has to go up into this piece. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a spring-loaded pin right there. Kind of makes it a little difficult, so that's hence when you force the shifter over to the driver's side, that pops that spring out. But it won't go right now because this is blocking it from going up. And this shaft is the four-wheel drive shaft, shift fork shaft. So when you put it in four-wheel drive, this shaft moves down and that frees this up so it can rotate. So I'll push that down, pretend like we're putting it in four-wheel drive. Now once it's in four-wheel drive, it frees this arm right here. I can't push it because it's spring-loaded and it's pretty strong. But it allows this to rotate. So this is the lock right here that keeps you from putting it in the granny gear or extra low when all the other gears are engaged. So moving this lever right here pushes that back. I'm going to rotate the lever and see how that moves. That's your chief preventer right there from being able to put it in extra low is moving that right there. Puts it in 4-wheel drive, it's down. Once out of 4-wheel drive, it's up and it blocks. Now when it does go into 4-wheel drive, this has to move back this direction. Let's see if I can. So it popped back, and now it's in the extra low gear. And what keeps it in the extra low gear is the ball bearing on top with the spring putting pressure down on a slot. So if that ball bearing is missing, you might have trouble keeping it in the granny gear. I think I covered everything, as confusing as it might be. So there's the roll pin, and then when it's in granny gear, the roll pin moves aft. The camera kept cutting out there because I think my battery's going dead. I'm not sure what's going on. Alright, I guess that's about all I know about that. Hopefully I can piece this back together and make a decent video out of it. This is a dissected transmission. Right now, it's not in 4-wheel drive. So if I put it in 4-wheel drive, watch that fork move aft. Now it's in 4-wheel drive. It connects to rear drive line. So this fork is your granny gear. In order for it to move over, I've got to push the shifter really hard that direction and then pull it back, or push it forward, I mean, and then it moves that slide. Now it's in granny gear. You can see how this thing is moved back as far as it'll go this way. And the fork down below here, which shifts first and second gear, is in the center. I'm going to pop it out. Try to anyway. And you see that move back to its regular position, and that thing move forward this way off of the synchro mesh's teeth down here in the synchros. And that's about it. I'll put this back in out of 4-wheel drive. You can kind of barely see the gap there on the left where it joins those two gears together. So as we're at the end here, I'd like to bring up something. If you're having problems with yours staying in 4-wheel or that granny gear, it could be because that ball bearing wasn't installed or the spring inside here is missing. When they caught up to him, Miller was the one with the pipe. Or you see that shaft, it's got a flat side on the bottom. It's possible to install it with the flat side on top. If you do that, that'll mess up all the shifting too. He reported minor injuries. His brother reported no injuries. Initially, Miller was charged with theft. That was dropped months later. There you can see the flat side better on the bottom. Leading to the